Two homeless twin girls sing on a bus to earn money for food. They don't realize that the man with tears in his eyes is their father. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. The city of Chicago, with its endless corridors of steel and glass, was already beginning to glisten beneath the weight of early October drizzle. A blur of yellow headlights moved slowly down Lakeshore Drive as people rushed from office buildings, umbrella tips clashing like dueling sabers. On the 35th floor of a high-rise tower in the Loop, Darius Hunt stood alone in his sleek penthouse, the skyline reflected on the polished windows behind him. The apartment was modern, pristine, and cold, not from the temperature, but from its silence. Not a photo on the walls, not a single toy, not even a misplaced coffee mug hinted that the space had once been filled with life. Darius adjusted his tie with mechanical precision and turned off the lights. The office called again. Another meeting, another design pitch, another skyscraper to pierce the clouds. He no longer remembered how it felt to build something for himself. These days he merely drafted dreams for others. At 37, Darius was known as one of the most promising architects in Chicago. His name appeared in business magazines, his firm boasted clients from New York to Dubai, and yet none of it mattered. Not since that day 3 years ago. He remembered it in fragments, the harsh ring of the phone, the sound of rain outside, the taste of coffee gone cold. Catherine's voice, barely comprehensible through her sobs. Jackie, the girls, the crash. Then came the silence that fell over his world like wet cement. Jacqueline, his wife, Avani and Layla, his 5-year-old twin daughters. Gone, she said, a collision on the interstate. The car burst into flames. No survivors. The days that followed blurred into a haze of sedatives and murmured condolences. Catherine had taken care of everything. She was always efficient that way. The funeral, the death certificates, the ashes in an urn he refused to open. He hadn't even seen their bodies. Just closed caskets and the bitter taste of despair. After that, life had become a scaffold with no foundation. He walked, spoke, even smiled at times, but nothing anchored him. The world carried on. Darius remained suspended. Now, 3 years later, he found himself behind the wheel of a black Mercedes AMG, gliding down Southside's wet avenues on his way home from a site meeting. The windshield wipers hummed in rhythm with his thoughts, each one slicing across glass like the pages of a story he never wanted to read again. He was supposed to feel something. Closure, maybe. But there was only numbness. Then the engine coughed. It was a single stutter at first, easy to dismiss, but it happened again, twice more, before the car began to slow. Darius frowned, his grip tightening on the leather wheel as he steered into the shoulder. A thin veil of steam rose from beneath the hood, curling into the air like a ghost. Not today, he whispered, forehead resting briefly against the steering wheel. Please, not today. The irony struck him like a punch. He could design earthquake-proof towers and green-certified homes, but his car, a top-of-the-line machine, was dying on the very anniversary that shattered his world. He stepped outside into the drizzle. His jacket was no match for the wind, and the passing cars did little to slow as he waved for assistance. The towing service told him it would be at least an hour. He sighed and glanced around. A faded CTA bus stop sign loomed a few yards ahead. For a man like Darius, public transportation was a distant memory, something he hadn't used since his college days. But desperation is a great equalizer. Moments later, he boarded the 29 bus, scanning for a clean seat. The interior smelled faintly of mildew and wet coats. A teenage boy blared music from his phone. A woman with tired eyes balanced grocery bags between her feet. Darius moved toward the rear, unbuttoning his coat, trying not to draw attention in his tailored slacks and shined Oxfords. He sat, eyes drifting to the foggy window, the city blurring into abstract light. He hadn't meant to remember the date, but his body did. Muscle memory of heartbreak. Today would have been the girl's 8th birthday. Jackie always made pancakes shaped like flowers. Layla would wear her purple tutu, and Avani would insist on lighting her own candles. He could still hear their laughter, see frosting smudged across their cheeks. Then it happened. A soft melody rose above the clamor of the bus, delicate, almost trembling. 2 young voices singing in unison. Darius turned instinctively, breath caught in his throat. Standing halfway down the aisle were 2 girls, no older than 8. Dark brown skin, cascading curls damp from the rain, patched jackets too small for their frames. Yet they radiated something familiar. The song, that song. After the rain, there comes a light, a rainbow dancing in the night. Darius's heart stopped. It was the lullaby, the very one Jackie had made up when the twins were babies, something only their little family ever knew. It had no sheet music, had never been recorded, just soft whispers in the dark when thunder shook the windows. He stared, barely breathing. One of the girls had a tiny scar above her eyebrow, exactly where Layla had fallen off her scooter months before the accident. The other girl held her sister's hand protectively, her chin raised with silent strength, just like Avani always did. This couldn't be. He stood slowly, hand gripping the metal pole for balance. "Excuse me," he said, voice cracking. "Girls?" They turned. For the briefest of moments, their eyes met his. Recognition flashed, real, raw, and then fear. They bolted. The bus hissed to a stop at the next intersection, doors folding open with a mechanical sigh. The girls vanished into the rain-slicked crowd before Darius could reach them. He stumbled after them onto the sidewalk, scanning the street, breath ragged. But they were gone, swallowed by the city that had once swallowed his grief. For a long time, he stood there, drenched and shaking. His reflection in the puddle at his feet showed a man out of place, an architect in Armani, disoriented and alone. 1,000 thoughts crashed against the walls of his mind, none of them making sense. He looked up towards the sky, clouds pressing low like the weight in his chest. There had to be an explanation. This couldn't be coincidence. That lullaby, those faces. He'd seen them in dreams, in nightmares, but this had been real. They had been real. Darius turned slowly and walked home, the city suddenly unfamiliar. That night, in the echoing quiet of his penthouse, he sat in the middle of the living room floor with old photo albums spread around him like relics. Every picture, every smile, every crayon-scrawled note his daughters had once made. He memorized their handwriting, the way Avani always drew suns with sunglasses, the way Layla wrote her name backward half the time. He stayed there until sunrise, heart beating like a war drum. They were alive. He didn't know how, he didn't know why, but he would find them, even if he had to tear down the whole city to do it. Morning arrived in shades of steel. The skyline beyond Darius's windows lay wrapped in a mist so dense it erased the horizon. He hadn't slept. Shadows painted crescents beneath his eyes, and a low hum buzzed in his ears from a night of relentless pacing. All around him, the remnants of his vigil remained. Photo albums left open, a dried flower pressed in a baby book, a purple plastic barrette Avani once insisted he wear during her tea parties. The apartment, always so immaculate, looked like it had exhaled 3 years' worth of grief in one violent breath. He moved like a man under water, slow, deliberate, fighting against disbelief. Each step he took through the apartment felt like navigating a crime scene, and maybe, in some way, it was. Not a crime of blood, but of omission. A lie so cruel it had rewritten the very structure of his life. He picked up his phone, hesitating only a moment before calling the one person he knew would believe him without mockery or doubt. Marcus Livingston answered on the second ring. His voice was rough with sleep, but alert as soon as he recognized who was calling. A former detective and now private investigator, Marcus had been Darius's roommate in college, his best man at the wedding, and the one who sat beside him in silence when he collapsed after the funeral. "You sound like hell," Marcus said, not unkindly. "I need your help," Darius replied, his voice dry and brittle. "Something happened yesterday." An hour later, they met in a quiet cafe in Bronzeville. Marcus was still the same. Tall, broad, his coat rumpled and a permanent crease between his eyebrows. He listened without interruption as Darius recounted everything. The bus, the song, the girls. When he was finished, Marcus sat back and tapped a pen against the rim of his coffee cup. "And you're certain?" he asked, not skeptically but cautiously. It wasn't just an emotional echo. Darius pulled out his phone and showed him the photo he'd managed to snap just before the girls vanished. It was blurry, taken in motion, but clear enough to show the features. Marcus leaned in, and something shifted in his face. "That's not just resemblance," he said after a moment. "That's genetics." "I knew it the second I heard the song," Darius said. "Jackie wrote that lullaby. No one else ever heard it but us." Marcus nodded. "All right, let's start from the beginning. What exactly do you remember from the accident?" Darius hesitated, the pain still raw even as the facts turned foggy. "I was at the Harwood construction site. Around 2:30, my phone rang. It was Catherine. She was hysterical. Said Jackie had taken the girls to see her parents in Michigan for the weekend, and there was an accident. Truck ran a red light. Head-on collision." Marcus frowned. "You went to identify the bodies?" "No, I had a panic attack. Blacked out. I was sedated for 3 days. Catherine handled everything. The funeral, the cremation. I didn't question it." "Why would you? You were in shock," Marcus said, scribbling something in a notebook. "But it's not adding up. You never saw their bodies. Never confirmed anything yourself." "I know how it sounds." Marcus met his eyes. "No, you don't. It sounds like someone took your kids." The words hung in the air like a sudden drop in temperature. They spent the rest of the morning tracing routes. Marcus contacted a friend at the transit authority who confirmed that the same 2 girls were seen frequently on midday routes near the warehouses south of Roosevelt Road. "They sing," the driver had said. "Sweet voices like angels. People give them change." By late afternoon, they sat parked near one of the main bus routes. Rain had resumed, a steady percussion on the windshield. Darius watched the street with laser focus, his breath fogging the glass. "Let's say they are your girls," Marcus said. "There's still the question of how they survived and where they've been. The system doesn't just misplace 2 children." Darius exhaled sharply. What if it wasn't the system that misplaced them? What if they were never entered into it in the first place? They followed buses, asked questions, even stopped by shelters, but most staff shrugged or shook their heads. The girls moved often, like shadows. That night, Darius sat in his living room with a glass of untouched scotch and made another decision. The next time he saw them, he needed proof. Not memories, not feelings. Irrefutable proof. If the world had stolen his daughters from him, he would give it back their names in ink and blood. With Marcus's help, he devised a plan. They would wait near the main route where the driver had spotted the girls several times. They'd follow discreetly, and if they found them, gather DNA, spit, a hair, anything. It felt cold, clinical, even predatory, but necessary. The third day brought reward. A volunteer from a community kitchen recognized the description. "They come in sometimes," she said. "We let them eat if they help clean up." Darius felt his chest tighten. "Could you save something they've used?" A paper cup, half full of orange juice, was handed over with care. Marcus sealed it in a sterile bag and took it to a private lab in Evanston. The technician promised results in 3 to 5 days. Darius didn't sleep. While Marcus dove into background checks, public records, hospital archives, and insurance claims, Darius fell into memory. He wandered the rooms of his home like a ghost, recalling the soft murmur of bedtime stories, the scent of baby shampoo, the squeal of laughter down the hallway. He stood in the nursery, the room no one entered, and traced the outline of stars on the ceiling that still glowed in the dark. He began to notice patterns. The barrette left behind. A butterfly's sticker still clinging to the mirror. Notes from Catherine that had once comforted him now felt rehearsed. Clean handwriting, no mistakes, no emotion. Marcus returned with troubling news. "Catherine's financials don't make sense," he said. "She quit her job shortly after the funeral, but bought a new car and moved into a luxury condo within 6 months." Darius blinked. "Insurance money?" "She wasn't listed on any policy," Marcus said, then paused. "Or rather, she wasn't supposed to be." He held up a printout of a modified life insurance document. The beneficiary had been changed 3 months before the alleged accident. From Darius to Catherine. A wave of nausea swept through him. "They weren't just taken from me," Darius said slowly. "They were erased." Marcus placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We're not finished. The lab will confirm it soon, and when they do, Darius said, voice growing harder, "we'll burn down every lie that was built on their names." 3 days turned into 4. Then, finally, the call. The technician's voice was calm but carried weight. "The sample matches. Paternal confirmation is conclusive. They're your daughters, Mr. Hunt." Darius sat in stunned silence. The words echoed, repeated, circled like the lullaby in his dreams. "They're your daughters." He whispered their names into the quiet apartment. Avani. Layla. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence answered back. The confirmation did not bring peace. It brought a storm. Darius had imagined the moment 1,000 times. The phone ringing, the technician's voice calm but sure, the numbers aligned, the truth undeniable. He had told himself that once he heard the words, "They're your daughters," something inside him would finally settle. But there was no settling. There was only movement, fire, urgency. For 3 years he had walked like a man in a coma. Now, with that one sentence, he had awakened into a reality more dangerous than the grief that had kept him numb. He stood at the window, phone still in his hand, eyes sweeping across the city below as if he might see them, his daughters, walking somewhere among the streets like before. A part of him wanted to run, right then, out the door, back to that bus route, back to that moment when her eyes had met his and fled. But Marcus, always the anchor to his storm, insisted on caution. "We need more than emotion now," Marcus said. "This is no longer about if, it's about how. How this happened, how they survived, and how we make sure they're safe when we get them back." The two men sat in the dim light of Darius's apartment, maps spread across the table, a timeline slowly forming between coffee mugs and laptop cords. It was Marcus who first connected the dots between Catherine's new lifestyle and the date of the so-called accident. Her condo purchase, her luxury SUV, her extended trip to Europe a year after. All suspicious, all funded, it seemed, by something far beyond her known income. It was also Marcus who discovered that she had worked in the insurance industry years before, just long enough to know the inner workings, just long enough to understand how to fake what needed to be faked. Then came the other calls: shelter workers, bus drivers, food pantry volunteers, people who had seen the girls, people who described them as sweet, careful, always together. Avani, the taller one, the leader. Layla, quiet but observant, always scanning for exits. They stayed away from adults. They never gave a last name. They avoided questions. Darius listened to every word as if each syllable were a piece of the broken mirror of his life. Each new detail was a fracture mending. And then, one evening, as the sun sank low over the lake and the city hummed with tired commuters and glowing tail lights, he saw them again. He was parked near the west entrance of a strip mall just off Cermak Road, watching the usual lunch crowd trickle into fast food places and convenience stores. It was a hunch, nothing more, but something in him, father's instinct perhaps, had told him to be there that day. They came around the corner from behind a building, walking side by side, humming softly, each holding a battered cardboard box like a makeshift instrument case. Avani's coat hung open, revealing a tattered dress beneath. Layla had her hood up, but a curl escaped at the side, bouncing with each step. Darius couldn't breathe. He stepped out of the car, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. His eyes never left them. Then they began to sing. The same song. After the rain, the rainbow stays. The sun still shines when the sky is gray. It was them. God, it was really them. He walked forward, not too fast, but they saw him. Avani's head turned, her eyes widened with something beyond recognition, fear. "No, wait," he called, hands up. "I'm not here to—" They ran. The crowd was thick just outside the bus stop, but the girls slipped through it like water through fingers. Darius followed, weaving through pedestrians, nearly knocking over a cyclist. He heard their footsteps ahead, smaller, faster. They turned into an alley, then another. Darius pushed himself harder than he had in years, but they knew the streets better than he did. They knew which fences were broken, which doors opened to back exits, which shadows to disappear into. When he finally reached the alley behind an old mechanic's shop, it was empty. Only the echo of retreating footsteps and the sick twist of helplessness remained. He stood there, chest heaving, damp with sweat, his dress shoes scuffed from a broken pavement. He had failed again. But this time they hadn't just run because they didn't recognize him. They had recognized him. That night, back at his apartment, Darius barely heard Marcus knock. He sat on the floor again, near the couch, surrounded by childhood mementos, old toys he couldn't bring himself to throw away, drawings still magnetized to the fridge, tiny shoes folded in a blanket. He looked up when Marcus entered, his eyes haunted. "They knew me," he whispered. "They were scared of me." Marcus didn't try to deny it. He sat beside his friend and waited until the silence passed. "They said something," Darius added, voice breaking. "One of them, Layla, I think. She said I looked like the man in her dreams." "Dreams?" "She said I sang to them when it thundered. Jackie used to say that to them. 'Don't be afraid of the thunder. Daddy's voice is louder than the storm.'" They remember you, Marcus said gently. Not clearly, not logically, but somewhere, deep down, they do. Darius turned toward him. We have to find them. We have to get them out before Catherine knows we're close. Marcus nodded. Then we start tonight. They printed flyers, anonymous ones, asking for information about 2 young girls seen singing near bus routes. A cash reward, a tip line, no names. The next morning, Marcus contacted a friend at a local food pantry. They coordinated with volunteers to keep an eye out. And then a name. Pierre, an older homeless man who'd seen the flyers, approached them during one of their stakeouts. "You looking for those 2 girls?" he asked, his voice gravelly from decades of cold nights and cigarettes. "I seen 'em, under the Morrison Bridge. Been staying there a while." Darius's heart jumped into his throat. "Are they safe?" Pierre shrugged. "Far as I can tell. Don't trust nobody, though, especially grown men. They keep to themselves, smart kids." They left immediately. By nightfall, they reached the underpass. The place was bleak. Rows of cardboard bundled figures around makeshift fires, the ever-present scent of urine and wet concrete. And then, past a crumbling column sprayed with graffiti, he saw them. 2 little girls, huddled together beneath a threadbare blanket, sharing what looked like a peanut butter sandwich. Avani's arm was wrapped around Layla's shoulder. Layla's feet were bare. Darius stepped forward. Avani noticed first. She rose, placing herself protectively between him and her sister. "Don't come closer," she said, trying to sound braver than she was. "I brought food," Darius said, slowly reaching into his coat. "That's all, I promise." He placed the grocery bag gently on the ground between them, then stepped back. Avani didn't move, but Layla peeked out from behind her. Hunger flickered in her eyes. "What kind of sandwiches?" she asked timidly. Darius's voice cracked. "Turkey and cheese, and peanut butter with jelly, your favorites." Layla looked up at her sister. "He knows what we like." Avani wavered, but eventually allowed Darius to leave the bag. The girls pounced on the food like animals who had gone too long without. Darius turned away, not to pressure them, and not to let them see him cry. When they finished, he asked gently, "What's your last name?" Avani tensed. "We don't have one. Everyone has a last name. Not us. The bad people said we don't need one." "Which bad people?" But before she could answer, Layla touched her sister's hand. "He knew our song. He brought the jelly kind." Avani didn't respond. Darius took a breath. "I lost 2 girls. They had your names. One had a scar above her eyebrow. The other had a crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder." Both girls froze. Layla's hand slowly moved to her forehead, as if feeling for something. Avani's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't prove anything?" "No," Darius said softly, "but maybe this does. Your mom, Jackie, she used to sing you a lullaby about the rainbow. She wrote it just for you." Layla gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "You know our song?" Darius nodded. "It's our song. I sang it to you every night." The silence stretched long. "In my dreams," Layla whispered, tears spilling over her cheeks, "there's a man. He sings to us when it storms. A pretty lady, too. She smells like oranges." Avani shook her head. "We're not supposed to talk about dreams." "Who told you that?" Darius asked. Neither of them answered. Then Avani took Layla's hand and whispered, "We have to go." She began gathering their things. Layla hesitated. "He said he loves us more than all the stars." "I do," Darius said, falling to his knees. "I never stopped." But they were already running, back into the shadows, back into the only safety they knew. Darius knelt on the cold concrete long after they vanished, surrounded by the echo of footsteps and the memory of a song only they could finish. The darkness under the Morrison Bridge lingered in Darius's mind long after the girls had vanished back into it. The coldness in Ivani's eyes, the guarded way she placed herself between him and her sister, and the terror behind Layla's trembling voice haunted him like the final notes of a half-finished lullaby. He had found them, truly found them, but they were too broken, too wary to believe in safety anymore. Worse, they had learned to survive without him, and in that fact was a sorrow sharper than death. Marcus arrived just past midnight, his coat still damp from rain, carrying a laptop and a manila folder. Darius was pacing his living room, his hands raw from clutching the cold iron column under the bridge for too long. His voice was hoarse when he explained everything, what the girls had said, how they reacted, what they remembered. Marcus listened without interruption, though a storm brewed behind his calm expression. "She remembers the lullaby," Darius said quietly, sitting heavily on the arm of the sofa. "She said in her dreams, I sing it to her during thunderstorms. And Ivani, she protects her like a soldier. I saw Jackie in her, same fire." "They're still out there," Marcus said. "That means we have a chance. I can't wait anymore. I need to bring them in, shelter them, feed them, clean them. They can't keep living like that." Marcus nodded. "We need a safe place, not just temporary, somewhere secure, somewhere Catherine won't find." Darius had almost forgotten her name. Catherine. His sister-in-law, the one who had called with the news of the accident, who had arranged the funeral, the cremation, the paperwork, who had stood beside him as he buried ashes he never verified. Marcus handed him the manila folder. "I've been looking deeper, bank accounts, property records. She's been busy these last 3 years. Condo on Michigan Avenue, trips to Barbados, designer purchases, all on a modest salary and no declared inheritance. Until now, I couldn't trace the source, but yesterday I found it." Darius opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was a document bearing Jackie's name, her life insurance policy. A signature had been changed. The beneficiary, once marked as Darius Hunt, now bore the name Catherine Monroe. The change dated 3 months before the supposed accident. And next to it, another paper. Jackie's will, also altered, another false signature. "She worked in insurance," Marcus said grimly. "She had access, she knew the language, she knew how to make it clean." "But why?" Darius whispered. "Envy," Marcus said simply. "Jealousy, control, or maybe just greed. But whatever it was, she built her new life on their graves. And now that you've seen the girls, she knows that House of Cards could collapse." A silence settled between them, heavy and bitter. Then Darius stood. "We bring them in tomorrow. I don't care what it takes. I'll camp under that bridge if I have to, but I'm not leaving them again." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won't have to." At dawn, they returned. Darius brought a heavy duffel filled with food, blankets, dry clothes, and a first aid kit. This time he didn't try to speak much. He simply sat near where the girls had huddled the night before, opened a sketch pad, and began to draw. It was instinctive, perhaps foolish, but he hoped they might be watching. He drew their old house with the white porch and the blue door. Then their dog, Max, with his oversized tongue. Then a kitchen with pancakes shaped like flowers. When he looked up, Layla was sitting just a few feet away, knees drawn to her chest. "What are you drawing?" she asked, voice small. Darius swallowed hard. "Home," he said. "Can I try?" He handed her the pad and the colored pencils. She sorted them by color first, exactly as Avani used to do. Then she picked the yellow one and began with the sun. Avani approached minutes later, reluctant but unable to ignore her sister's curiosity. She didn't sit, but she watched. Darius didn't press her. When Layla finished, she held the picture up. A man, a woman, 2 girls, and a dog in front of a house with a rainbow in the sky. She had labeled it, in messy handwriting, "My Family." Later that day, under Marcus's watchful eye, they got the girls into the car. They resisted at first, especially Avani, but hunger and exhaustion had eroded their strength. Darius promised nothing but warmth and rest. No questions, no tricks. The safe house was a 2-story rental in the outskirts of Oak Park, tucked behind trees and away from the main roads. Darius had paid in cash. He installed cameras, changed the locks, and placed motion detectors at every door. A private doctor came in the evening and examined the girls. Layla had a sprained ankle and signs of malnutrition. Avani's arm was still tender from a past break that had never healed properly. Dr. Lefebvre arrived the next morning. She was a warm, middle-aged black woman with eyes that missed nothing and a voice soft enough to lower walls. She sat with the girls separately, listening more than she spoke. When she finished her first session, she pulled Darius aside. "They're stronger than they know," she said, "but their trust has been shattered. Rebuilding it will take time." "I'll give them all the time they need," Darius replied. He let them choose their rooms. Layla wanted yellow walls. Avani, after much thought, picked purple. Darius painted them himself, listening to their soft footsteps in the hallway, the way their laughter sometimes sparked and then quickly dimmed. He learned that Layla loved to color and Avani liked to arrange things, books by size, crayons by hue, socks by pattern. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe they had turned a corner. Then, on a Thursday night at 2:47 a.m., the smoke alarm shrieked. The house was filled with smoke. The stench of burning plastic choked the air. Flames licked the edges of the stairwell. Somewhere, a window shattered from the heat. Darius didn't think. He grabbed a soaked towel, tied it around his face, and charged down the hallway. The girls were huddled on the bed in the master bedroom, eyes wide, frozen. He wrapped them in blankets and carried them through the smoke. They coughed and cried, but held on tight. The front door burst open just as part of the ceiling gave way. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. The girls clung to him as they watched the fire consume their temporary home. The firefighters arrived within minutes. Marcus, who had been sleeping in his car nearby as a precaution, arrived seconds later. The blaze was controlled, but the damage was done. It hadn't been an accident. The investigators confirmed the use of an accelerant near the back window. The fire had been set with intention. In the back of the ambulance, as the girls were checked for burns, Layla looked up at her father. "The bad people found us, didn't they?" Darius nodded. Avani's voice was flat. "Everyone who helps us gets hurt." "No," Darius said fiercely, gathering them both into his arms. "The people who try to hurt you, those are the ones who are going to suffer now." Later, at Marcus's apartment where they took temporary refuge, Darius stared at the wall while the girls slept on the couch beside him. They were finally beginning to heal, and already they had been forced to run again. The fire had stolen their blankets, their drawings, the new toothbrushes Layla had picked with pink sparkles. "They're terrified again," Darius said, his voice rough. Marcus sat across from him, a laptop open. "We've got something. I traced more of the funds. Catherine didn't just cash in the insurance policy. She rerouted Jackie's estate, too. Every penny that should have gone to the girls ended up in her account. Darius closed his eyes. "She's not going to stop," Marcus added. "She knows the truth is closing in. She's trying to clean it up before we bring it public." "Then we hit first," Darius said. "We will, but we have to do it right. You know how this works. If we push too early, she walks. What do you want to do? Let her believe she won. Let her believe you're broken. Meanwhile, we build the case." Darius looked over at the girls. Layla was curled beneath Ivani's arm, their bodies pressed close, as if only each other could keep the nightmares away. "Whatever it takes," he said. He stepped outside, stared up at the stars, and made a silent promise to the sky. They would never run again. Not from the fire. Not from shadows. Not from her. The scent of smoke still clung to Darius's coat long after the last of the flames had been extinguished. Days had passed since the fire consumed the safe house, and yet in every corner of Marcus's apartment Darius could still feel its heat, could still see the panic in his daughter's eyes as they stood barefoot in the driveway, illuminated by sirens, their new world turned to ash. It wasn't just a fire. It was a message. Catherine knew, and she was willing to burn everything to keep her secret buried. Marcus's apartment had become their new refuge, though it was barely suited for 2 adults, let alone 2 traumatized children. The girls shared the pull-out couch in the living room, surrounded by hastily purchased blankets and toys. Darius had moved into Marcus's study, sleeping on an air mattress between filing cabinets and stacks of printed documents. Every night he checked the locks twice, and every morning he rose before dawn, checking the surveillance footage from cameras Marcus had installed around the building. The weight of protection sat heavy on his shoulders, but he welcomed it. For the first time in 3 years, he had purpose beyond grief. Each meal he made, each bruise he soothed, each story he read aloud was an act of reclamation, proof that he had not failed them forever. The girls were still wary, but the rhythm of routine began to work its quiet magic. Layla clung to him with increasing frequency, her hand slipping into his without words. She would sit beside him during breakfast and watch his every movement, as if committing him to memory. Ivani, more guarded, spoke little, but her gaze softened when he entered a room, and she no longer flinched when he reached for the remote or stood too close. She had begun to ask quiet questions, always about the past, what her mother liked to cook, what their rooms looked like, if Max the dog had truly eaten an entire box of crayons once. Darius answered each one with care, offering pieces of a life stolen from them, hoping the fragments might lead them home. Marcus, meanwhile, worked around the clock. He coordinated with a civil rights attorney named Bria Caldwell, sharp, relentless, and deeply moved by the girl's story. She had experience with wrongful guardianship cases and financial fraud, and the moment she saw the forged documents and insurance statements, her face hardened. "This isn't just fraud," she said after the first review. "It's child endangerment. Attempted murder, if we can link her to the arson, and depending on the timeline, maybe even kidnapping." Bria began the process of building a legal wall around the girls. She filed emergency guardianship petitions under sealed documents, drawing on Darius's confirmed DNA and the girls' medical records to prove paternity. She reached out to sympathetic judges and social workers, careful not to trigger an alert that might reach Catherine's network. Every step had to be invisible, until the moment came to strike. The waiting gnawed at Darius. He was used to blueprints, deadlines, concrete goals, but this was a slow erosion of justice, A battle fought with paper, patience, and precision. He wanted to run to Catherine's door, pound on it, scream until the world listened, but he had seen what she was capable of. The fire had been her warning. One misstep, and she would vanish again, this time for good. One afternoon, Layla approached him with a folded piece of notebook paper. On it, she had drawn the four of them, herself, Avani, Darius, and Jackie. She had given herself wings. "These mean I'm brave now," she explained, her voice almost a whisper. "I can fly away if the bad people come." Darius took the drawing carefully, holding it like sacred scripture. "You don't have to fly away anymore," he told her. "Not without me." She smiled then, small and fleeting, but real. Avani saw the exchange from across the room, her eyes flicking between the paper and her father's face. She said nothing, but that night she placed her favorite blanket, the one with tiny stars, on his air mattress before bed. She didn't explain, and he didn't ask. The following morning brought a shift. Marcus returned from the courthouse with a thin smile and a folder clutched tightly in his hands. "She's been served," he said simply. Bria had filed a formal petition to invalidate the forged insurance and estate documents. A restraining order was now in effect, protecting Darius and the girls from Catherine Monroe, whose assets were being temporarily frozen pending investigation. A court date had been set for 3 weeks later. It was the first official blow, but it didn't go unnoticed. That night, Marcus's building was broken into. The cameras caught 2 men in hooded sweatshirts attempting to bypass the back entrance keypad. When they failed, they smashed a window and entered the stairwell. The footage ended there. The power had been cut before they reached the apartment door. Marcus was ready. The girls were rushed to a locked bedroom while he and Darius waited with flashlights and a pair of legally registered firearms. The intruders never made it past the front door. A neighbor had called the police at the sound of breaking glass. The men escaped before officers arrived, but the message was clear. Catherine wasn't just desperate. She was escalating. Bria requested emergency police protection, which was granted within hours. 2 plainclothes officers were assigned to the family, and a protective order was issued directly to Catherine's attorney. A quiet war had begun, but now it had teeth. The girls felt the tension in every movement. Layla stopped drawing for days. Avani stopped speaking entirely, her silence coiling tight around her like armor. Darius felt powerless again, his hands trembling as he tucked them in each night, knowing that danger pressed closer with every breath. Then came the call. Bria's voice shook slightly over the line. "She's trying to flee the country." Catherine had booked a one-way flight to Dubai, scheduled for the next morning. Bria had filed a motion within the hour to bar her from leaving. But there were complications. Technical delays, procedural loopholes, corrupt players who owed Catherine favors. "We might lose her," Bria admitted, "unless we move fast." That evening, Marcus, Bria, and Darius met in person. The girls stayed in a hotel suite under protection, watched over by the same officers who had once doubted Darius's claims. Now they called him Mr. Hunt with respect. "We go public," Bria said. "Tonight." Darius stared at her. "Are you sure?" "She wants silence," Bria explained. "Wants the system to stall long enough for her to disappear. But she can't outrun a headline." They contacted a trusted journalist, a woman named Camille Terrell, known for her fearless reporting on social injustice. She had interviewed survivors of state corruption, foster care abuse, and whistleblowers alike. When she read the file Marcus had prepared, she didn't hesitate. "This story goes live by sunrise," she said, "front page. and I'm not pulling punches. Darius sat down that night to record his statement. The camera was simple, the lighting unflattering, but his voice held every note of the storm. He spoke about the day he lost his wife, the fake funeral, the years of grief, the moment he saw his daughters again, alive, singing on a bus route. He held up the drawing Layla had given him. He named names. He didn't cry, but only because he couldn't afford to. The video was uploaded to the Tribune's website and syndicated within hours. By morning, it was viral. The public response was immediate and ferocious. Thousands of comments, shares, and messages poured in. Hashtags emerged. Activists demanded justice. Anonymous tips flooded Bria's office, and Catherine Monroe became the most hated woman in Chicago overnight. The flight to Dubai was canceled by federal order. She was arrested the following day at a downtown cafe, her designer coat cinched tight, sunglasses too large, pretending calm while U.S. Marshals read her rights. Her lawyer tried to speak. She waved him off with a single twitch of her hand. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Catherine looked up at a bystander holding a phone, recording the moment with stunned delight. Her mouth twisted into a bitter smile, and for the first time she was silent. Back at the hotel, when Darius heard the news, he didn't cheer. He didn't speak. He walked into the room where his daughters were watching cartoons and sat between them on the bed. He said only, "You're safe now." Layla crawled into his lap. Avani rested her head on his shoulder. Outside the window, the city glowed. For the first time in years, it felt like morning. In the days that followed Catherine's arrest, the air around them shifted. It was not a single moment of clarity or celebration. It was slower, deeper, like the thawing of ice after a long, brutal winter. The fear that had settled in the corners of every room began to loosen. The girls no longer flinched at every knock on the door, no longer paused to listen for distant sirens before falling asleep. For the first time in years, they were simply children. Darius barely left their side. The hotel suite had become a strange kind of home, sterile but safe, with thick curtains and a view of Lake Michigan that the girls liked to stare at in the evenings. Layla called it the Big Quiet Water. She asked if they could build a house near it one day, with rooms full of windows so they'd never lose sight of the sky again. Avani didn't answer but placed her hand on her sister's shoulder in agreement. The trial date had been set. Catherine was denied bail, and the charges against her continued to mount. Fraud, forgery, endangerment of minors, arson, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of attempted manslaughter. Bria called it the most clear-cut case of familial exploitation she had ever handled. The city watched closely. Darius's story had become a symbol of resilience, of stolen justice returned, of love that refused to die. And yet, amid the praise and media attention, he remained focused only on the two lives that mattered most. He began to cook for them again. Simple meals at first: grilled cheese, macaroni, warm soup with crusty bread. He made pancakes shaped like hearts on Sunday mornings, the way Jackie used to. Layla begged to help, standing on a step stool with her hair tied in two puffy ponytails, stirring batter until her arms grew tired. Avani watched from the table, sipping juice, one eye always on her sister, always alert. They saw the pediatrician twice a week. Layla was gaining weight steadily, her laughter returning in bursts. Avani remained lean and quiet, but the bruises under her eyes faded, and she began sleeping through the night. She still woke up early, sometimes sitting by the window as the sun climbed over the lake, arms wrapped around her knees, silently watching the world begin again. Darius knew that healing wouldn't come all at once. It would arrive slowly, in pieces, like the way Layla clutched his shirt when crossing the street, or how Ivana finally let him braid her hair without turning away. Each gesture was a note in the melody of recovery, and he tried his best to listen to it without rushing the tempo. One afternoon, they returned from a therapy session to find a package waiting at the hotel reception desk. No return address, just their names printed carefully on a white envelope taped to the top. Inside was a small music box, old and worn, with a winding key shaped like a heart. The girls stared at it as Darius turned the key gently and opened the lid. The melody was familiar. After the rain, the rainbow stays. The sun still shines when the sky is gray. Layla gasped, covering her mouth. Ivani stiffened, but didn't look away. "Mommy used to play that," Layla whispered, "in the kitchen, when she baked." "She did," Darius said, his voice catching. It was her favorite tune. "She had one like this on the shelf next to the sink. The one you broke once, Ivani, remember?" Ivani looked up, startled. "I didn't mean to. I was just turning the key. It cracked and—" "She never got mad," he finished for her. "She said music wasn't meant to be locked away in boxes." Layla reached for the music box and cradled it against her chest. Ivani reached out and touched the lid, running her finger along the edge. For the first time, they both smiled at the same time. Later that evening, they sat together on the hotel bed, Darius in the middle with an arm around each daughter, the music box between them. Layla hummed the melody under her breath, rocking slightly. Ivani didn't sing, but her lips moved in time, silent but sure. When the song ended, Layla looked up. "Can we go home now?" she asked. Darius hesitated. "Not yet, but soon." "Where's home?" Ivani asked. He looked between them and answered without doubt, "Wherever you are." The next morning, Darius met with Marcus and Bria at the courthouse. The emergency guardianship had been formally transferred into permanent custody. All parental rights, once falsely signed away, had been legally reinstated. The court offered a quiet hearing to protect the girls' privacy, and the judge, a soft-spoken woman with gray curls and clear eyes, had smiled as she signed the papers. Bria turned to Darius afterward. "It's done. You're officially their father again." "I never stopped being," he replied. Marcus chuckled, clapping him on the back. "Now you just have to prove you can still do ponytails and bedtime stories." "I never stopped those either." Back at the hotel, Darius held the custody papers in trembling hands. He placed them on the table in front of the girls, folded neatly in a bright green folder. Layla asked what it was, and he explained as simply as he could. "It means no one can take you away from me again," he said. "Not ever." Layla clapped, bouncing on the bed. "Forever and always? Forever and always?" Ivani looked at the folder, then at him. "Even if I get mad sometimes? Even if I don't talk for days?" He pulled her close. "Even then?" They moved into a townhouse on the south side a week later. It wasn't grand, but it had space, light, and a backyard where Layla could plant flowers. Ivani chose the biggest bedroom and asked for a bookshelf. Darius promised to build one by hand. Marcus came over with pizza on the first night. Bria dropped off a new music box, this one hand-carved from mahogany. The girls lined up their shoes by the door without being asked, and Layla picked out pajamas with stars for their first night in their new home. The rooms slowly filled with color, scent, and sound. Laughter returned. Music, too. One Sunday morning, Ivani asked Darius to sing. He blinked in surprise. "Sing what?" "Our song." He cleared his throat, sat on the floor between them, and began in a low, steady voice. After the rain, the rainbow stays. The sun still shines when the sky is gray. No matter how far the winds may blow, you'll find your way, and I'll be home. Layla joined him halfway through. Avani didn't, but she leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. Outside the window, the lake shimmered in the distance. The storm had passed, but its echo would remain. Not as pain, but as memory. A reminder of what had been lost and what had been found. The story would live on, not in headlines or courtrooms, but in the small things. In pancakes on Sundays, in the drawing on the fridge, in the sound of a music box winding down, and in the quiet heartbeat of a father who never stopped loving his daughters, even when the world had tried to bury them in silence. Darius knew they still had healing to do. Scars don't vanish, but with each day, each breath, they grew stronger, together. And sometimes, just before bedtime, when the house was calm and the windows open to the hum of the city, Layla would whisper, "Daddy, sing it one more time." He always did. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Check out the next video and explore others on the channel. And please, share this video with someone who needs to hear it.